So I'm curious, if two people commit the same harm, what makes one of them survivable and the other not? I've been sitting with that question since the first weekend of April when Ye performed 2 sold-out shows at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. 70,000 people a night. $33 million total across 2 evenings. The Friday show alone by itself became one of the highest grossing single concerts in live music history. But I don't want to talk about the numbers. I think everybody's talking about the numbers. What I want to talk about is what people were actually showing up for. Because if you watched the footage or if you were there, the first thing you noticed was the stage. A massive illuminated half orb placed at the center of the stadium floor with Ye performing on top of it, while lasers and fireworks and light columns reshaped the entire interior of the venue. The staging itself was more ambitious than anything seen in recent memory. The visual design was more coherent than most art installations. The sound design, the lighting cues, the spatial composition of how bodies moved through the arena, all of it was being directed at a level of detail most musical acts don't even attempt by one of the most relentlessly visual creators of the last 20 years. But that's exactly the point. Ye survives what he survives and comes back from what he comes back from because he is genuinely brilliant at what he does. The man has spent 2 decades building an integrated creative practice that spans music, fashion, architecture, stage design, industrial design, typography, an entire brand ecosystem. And you don't have to like or approve of him, and you don't even have to listen to the music, but you cannot look at what he built on that stage and tell me you're looking at something ordinary. And that, I think, is the conversation bigger than any story of redemption or forgiveness or even ticket sales. Some people who do bad things get canceled, and some people who do bad things don't. And the difference between the two groups, if we are being clear-eyed, is almost never the severity of the harm. A middle manager at, X company USA who said a fraction of the things that Kanye has said over the years would be absolutely canceled and forgotten forever. Same thing with a mid-tier podcaster. Let's say me, for example, if I said something crazy, I would lose any sponsors I had. My entire platform would be obliterated. But a generational creative talent who says the same thing plus more over a period of several years will fill SoFi Stadium for $33 million on a random weekend in April. That, my friends, is a signal of capitalism, not of morality. Here's the pattern. A culture quietly assigns every public figure a sort of creative surplus number. It's the amount of cultural value that a person is currently producing or is expected to keep producing or has produced enough of so far that the audience can't imagine not having access to it. And when something happens that would normally remove that person from public life, that surplus number is quietly weighed against the cost of harm. If the surplus is large enough, the person stays. If it's not, they don't. It's a rule that's very much unwritten. Nobody votes on it. Nobody kind of says it out loud, but it's very much the case. You can watch it in real time every time a scandal breaks, and the internet immediately begins the unofficial, unspoken calculation of how much this person is actually worth to us. And do we want to lose them? The washed up rapper who was never going to make another classic album, canceled. The one whose next album we're still waiting on, heralded. The actor whose career was already on a downslope, dropped by the studio. The one whose movie is opening in 3 weeks gets a written apology and a press tour. That, my friends, is the market, operating on creativity the way that it operates on any other good that some people produce more than others. And the reason that Ye is a perfect test case for this is that his surplus, by any honest measurement, is extraordinary. He's reshaped what hip hop looks like several times over the past 20 years. He's built a fashion line that moved the entire silhouette of streetwear. He's produced records that other producers study as holy grails. A specific silhouette of an oversized sneaker exists because he designed it, or the obsession with skin tone as a color palette, skin tone as a creative direction that has taken over every brand, including some of his ex-wives. He has, in the most literal sense, added things to the culture that otherwise would not exist. And so if you remove him from the culture is measurably smaller. That is simply the truth. And when a culture has to choose between losing something it values and losing the person who made it, the culture historically almost always chooses to keep the thing and renegotiate its relationship to the person. Here's what I want us to hold on to and be very honest about. 70,000 people showing up to SoFi Stadium is not evidence of anything having been made right. It is not a redemption story or some superpower about being uncancelable, because I saw that a lot too. You can't cancel. It has nothing to do with morality. It has nothing to do with the ability to be canceled. And that's the part that matters to me, because the rhetoric online has very much skewed in that direction. Oh my gosh, look how many people came. Look how much money it made. Look, the public decided that Kanye is forgiven. This has nothing to do with forgiveness. The public has decided nothing. The only thing that the public did was demonstrate their demand or their inability to stand on any sense of internal moral compass. Those are two different things. A sold out arena is a data point about what people are willing to pay for. It is not a data point about what the people paying have decided to endorse, forgive, accept, or excuse. But I want to push one step further than that, because this is where the real question lives. The deeper problem isn't that demand and rightness are two different transactions. The deeper problem is why. Why does demand get to run on one track and rightness on another? Why is it possible in 2026 for a person's audience to say in one sentence, what he did was wrong, and in the very next sentence say, but I already bought a ticket? Why did we collectively develop the ability to separate those two facts without experiencing the separation as a contradiction? Because it is very much a contradiction. And it wasn't always this way. There was a period in this country, in very recent memory, where mass demand was understood as a moral instrument. Boycotts moved markets. Where people spent their money was considered a legible expression of what they believed. You could read a community's values based on what it spent its money on. The Montgomery bus boycott did not work because one person took a stand. It worked because an entire town for over a year refused to let their demand run on a different track than their rightness. They fused the two on purpose, and they understood correctly that fusing them was a form of power. Somewhere between now and then, we lost that muscle, or maybe it was trained out of us. Or maybe even more likely, the sheer speed and volume of consumer life and the hundreds of micro purchases a week that we encounter, or the streaming services, the app downloads, the pre-sales, the impulse buys, the next concert announcement dropping while we're still mid-scroll buying the previous thing. It all got so fast that it stopped leaving room for our values to catch up before the transaction was even complete. And there's a whole industry that grew inside of that gap. The gap between what we believe and what we buy is functionally where modern marketing lives. And that gap is a product of the system, which means that the creative surplus math only works because the gap exists. If demand and rightness still moved as one, as they did in the boycott era, Ye's SoFi weekend would have looked a lot different. Any number of other artists' careers would have looked different. The math would produce different outputs because the inputs would be different. We collectively as a society stopped requiring our purchases to reflect our positions. And once we stopped, the market did too. And the market is never going to ask us to go back to doing something that could be risky to them. If we want to happily spend our money, the market will allow us to do so. People will attend a lot of things, but that doesn't make those things right. Even a car crash will slow down traffic for a little while. Spectating says very little about the quality of the show. Which brings me back to the question that I opened with. If two people do the same thing, what makes one of them survivable and the other not? And I think the honest answer, the one that culture seems to have enforced on us, but is not saying out loud, the one who has more to give is the one who's allowed to stay. The one who has less to give, gotta go. Which means the rule we are actually operating under is that creativity is kind of a shield. The more a person produces, the more of a protective margin they accumulate against the harms that they may cause. And that cancellation, when it works, almost only works on people who had already stopped producing enough for us to miss them. The people that we think of as, quote, uncancelable are not morally exempt. They are simply net positive enough in what they add to the culture that the math keeps coming out in their favor. I'm not telling you what to do with that, because I don't have a clean answer myself. And I don't think a lot of people, if they're being honest, have a clean answer. But I do think that we should stop pretending that the math isn't real. I want us to stop confusing a sold out arena for a verdict or some sign of redemption. We should be able to say out loud, this person made something I cannot find anywhere else. And this person also did something I cannot defend. And I am choosing actively to keep the first thing without pretending the second one went away. And that's a harder sentence to say than to just blindly celebrate somebody, right? Or to just say, I forgive him. But I do think that this is the most honest one, because it names the exchanges we're all quietly making instead of hiding the exchange under some morality play that we aren't actually even holding ourselves to. The stage of SoFi was beautiful. It was also the argument. It was both the spectacle people came to see and the reason he's been able to survive long enough to build it. And that's the thing we're sitting with. Not whether he deserved the night, but what the night tells us about how we collectively have decided to price creativity against harm, and whether we're okay with that exchange rate. The question is, what would it take to build a culture where creative surplus, creative value, doesn't outweigh the harm that may come with it? I don't know. I'm working on it. And I think that that's the only honest place to work on it from. I want you to do the same.